Highly recommend. Look up after you get done watching this the Head, Heart, Gut series on our YouTube. If you're a member of the Creative Executives or whatnot, go into the user portal and look up Head, Heart, Gut, because it is a very, very important piece of how you're going to go about your sales process. But today what we're going to do is we're going to point a little bit more to the script of it. We're going to talk a little bit more on what are we going to do in the actual conversation? How do you systemize speaking to somebody in such a way that you know that you're kind of running through somewhat of a formula in these conversations? I was having a conversation with one of my executive students yesterday, which is, she texted me last night. I'm so happy for her that she's thrilled that after that conversation, because she was worried about talking to the seller. She's kind of giddy and it's one of her first deals taken down. And we went through this and lo and behold, now the seller is interested in seller financing. They're going to be the contract signed and everything like that. There is a way to systemize your sales conversations so that you know you're kind of checking off going through a flow that's going to give you the information that you need to make the person on the other side of the table happy so that y'all can both come to an agreement that's going to eventually get you the deal that you're looking to get done. I'm Grant Kemp from CreativeCashFlow.com. Thank you so much for joining me here. Let's talk about what we're going to do in the 3-stage sales process, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop what you're going to do is you're going to go to your intranet, go over to the acquisitions tab. This is going to be all the stuff that's helping you with your acquisition side of things. And under the cold calling scripts, I want you to click on the standard outbound call, right? The long form. That's a pretty long form, right? But now down at the bottom where we get to if yes, interested, go to the hot lead 3-stage sales process, right? And this is what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to run through this with you guys because I think it's highly valuable information. What I've had to do here is I've spent a lot of time studying the art of salesmanship, right? We've got to make sure that we are able to convert after we spend all this money and time getting a lead on our table, right? The most important thing, I always ask people in this way, would you rather get 100 phone calls and 10 deals? Or would you rather get 15 phone calls and 10 deals? The difference purely comes down to, here's the process. I want you to have an understanding phase, an affirmation phase, and an alignment phase. That's the key. That's how we're going to keep this in a flow so that you can know that you are walking down the road. First, understand what they need, all right? What is it that makes them tick? What is it that makes them decide to sell their house? That kind of stuff. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read you the portion that I have kind of described on these phases, and then I'm going to describe a little bit about them as we go through it, okay? So that first stage is the understanding stage. This stage is where you ask discovery questions, okay? Ask as many or as few as you need until you feel you have a true grasp of what defines their decision-making process for the sale of this house. All right? I'm going to repeat that. Ask as many or as few discovery questions as you need of what defines their decision-making process, but not their like total decision-making process for their whole life. The decision-making process for the sale of this house. See, this is where I think that most scripts and most personality tests get it wrong. I think most people go into the personality test world and they like knowing, I'm a whatever the letters are, an LGBTQ 2165. I'm interpretive and I do well and blah, blah. I don't care what this person's leadership style is when they're stressed versus like the Myers-Briggs tells you all this kind of stuff. And it's good, right? It's good information maybe if you're staffing. But it doesn't matter in this situation of sales. None of that stuff matters. You're getting way too much opinion to have a field test to get into the head and understand what it is that's important to this person so that you can speak the language that they understand. Right? Because sales is language. Sales is understanding how you're going to pose a situation in such a way that it makes sense to the other person. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to you. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to that guy. It matters if it makes sense to the person that you are talking to. So you've got to share language. You've got to use all of those things that you're going to learn from books like Influence by Robert Cialdini or Never Split the Difference or, whatever it is that you're reading on sales technique, how to make friends and Grow Rich or whatever that what is it, Canary, what's his name, book is. you've got to use all of this. That I love most is the head, heart, gut. And that's why I encourage you to go do that, because all of this is going to be viewed through the lens of head, heart, gut. Similar, like if you're a biblical scholar, right? You're going to be viewing the Old Testament through the lens of the New Testament. Even though it's its own freestanding text, you've got to understand this first, or this other one, in order to really understand what the significance of a lot of these things are. You've got to really understand the head, heart, gut to really understand the significance of this understanding phase. Right? So you're going to ask a lot of questions. These are discovery questions. These are open-ended questions. These are not yes and no questions if you can avoid them. Right? It is best if you stay away from the a little bit. Pull that back. It's best if you can stay away from the yes or no's and ask the W questions, the whys, the whens, the whos, right? Let them discuss what's going on in their life. Now, when I go back to this phrase, I phrased it very carefully. You need to ask as many or as few questions you need until you feel like you have a true grasp of what defines their decision-making process for the sale of this house. Okay? That's what I mean by I don't care, like Myers-Briggs, what their leadership style is when they're stressed versus when they're comfortable. I don't care how they make decisions at the grocery store. What I care about is how they're going to decide whether or not to sell this house. Now, this seller is going to be in a tough spot, most likely, okay? Most likely you're speaking to somebody with some sort of motivation behind it. Now, they may not be like super like down in the ruts motivated, but they might be. But regardless, this is that they are undoubtedly not used to, right? Like, how many times do you think that the seller that you're buying from, how many times do you think that they've gone through selling a house? Do you think it's as many as you? Do you think it's as many as us? Likely not. This may be the first, this may be under the fifth time they've ever done that, but it's very uncommon that it's going to be more than the second, maybe third time that they've ever sold a property. So this process is new. Times have they sold a property to an investor, right? Now we're throwing in a whole different fork in the wrench in the spokes, whatever. Now we're throwing spokes here. They're going to be nervous, and you need to be receptive, and you need to be caring, and you need to understand the position that they are in. We are in the understanding phase, and part of most people's stress language is a little bit of verbal diarrhea because they don't really know what all matters to this, and you're making rapport conversation, and you're learning how their life is going, so they're going to give you all this information, right? Here is why having a structure to your conversation is just, you've got an understanding, an affirmation, and an alignment phase, right? If you don't have a goal in this conversation, if you're not pulling things back into somewhat of a structure that you're trying to lead down a line, you're going to allow the seller to talk at you for hours. Not doing information, just not necessarily sure what all matters and what doesn't, but you know what matters. Because you know the things that matter to your analysis, right? You're going to know that if they are talking about things that matter with the repairs of the house, that matters to you. If they're talking about motivations that have something to do with the timing of the sale, that matters to you. So they may spend 30 or 45 minutes talking about all this stuff, and you need to spend that time. Give them the respect of the conversation. Allow this to be a time that kind of calms the situation down and allows for a healthy kind of back and forth. You're building that rapport. It's just bought more houses than money ever has. We're building that rapport. But when they say something that cues you into, okay, they just said that they needed to be out of this house by next month. That is a piece of information that you're going to write in the back of your head or in your notes or whatever as something that matters for the sale of this house, right? You might run into a few of those. And we're going to use those in the affirmation phase, and I'm going to explain to you why that's so important for then. But while you're doing your rapport building, you're asking questions, you're looking for these little key words that might matter to the sales process and how they view it. As a reference to the head, heart, gut thing, I want to really make sure that people understand that, sometimes, well, actually, I'm going to go a different road. If you are a good salesperson, you are going to struggle, I hope, with the ethics of what you're doing, okay? You need to tackle the thought of, dude, I'm a good salesperson, right? Am I doing what's right by these people? I can convince anybody to do anything, but am I doing something that's truly beneficial to them, right? You always have to think about that. One of the things that can get very kind of gray area for a lot of folks is when you are doing sales and you are quote unquote convincing somebody to do something. You are selling somebody into it, right? And you're using language that they use. They call it a commode, so you call it a commode in your life. You're going to call it a commode today. And you can feel like you've got this question in the back of your mind of like, am I being manipulative? Is this a manipulation that I'm speaking the phrases that they are because it's going to help me get this sale? Is it manipulative that I'm... Here's the thing that I want you to remember. A, you've always got to give them all the picture, right? That's a very important part of this. As long as you give them the full picture and allow them to choose what's going on, you're golden. It's when you start sweeping things under the rug to try and kind of glaze over it, that's a problem. B, it is not a manipulation to speak in a language that person, a good salesperson, you're going to have to speak a language that would never sell you. Right? For instance, I'm a head guy. I want all the numbers. I want all the details. That's how I make decisions. Details, I let my gut take over and it tells me if whether or not I'm going to go forward with that. I'm basically heartless. However, I'm really good at buying houses from people who are heart driven, who are emotionally driven, who are visual language folks, and I can speak their language. Now, you may be in that situation after getting the understanding phase and understanding that this person is a heart decision maker who needs to be out by a certain time and XYZ, blah, 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 blah. That if you start speaking in terms that make sense to them about, for instance, the example that I use is if it's a heart person, right? Motivated by the fact that you're going to come in and you're going to clean the house up and you're going to provide it to be a new house for a new family to make memories in and grow from there, right? But if you only care about the numbers and you only care about the ARVs and all that kind of stuff, trying to sell somebody on this and saying, yeah, man, I'm going to buy this house. And you're not even talking about numbers. You're like, I'm going to buy this house. And here's the thing, like my job is to make her pretty again and to put her into a condition where I'm going to sell it to another family who might not have had a chance to buy this house or any other house, but I'm going to give them that opportunity and they're going to be able to come in here and make memories with their family just like you've done for the last 20 years, right? That might feel wrong because you don't care about that stuff, but who are you to say that the way that you think about things is better than the way that they think about things for their life? If they truly care more about making wide opportunities for other people, who are you to say, hey, that's the wrong way to think about things? I need to tell you what numbers you're going to be getting on this, right? It is your job as a good and ethical salesperson to give them the respect of understanding where they're coming from and speaking a language that they understand. The understanding phase is a two-way phase. And you've got to speak a language that they understand. But you can't speak that language unless you truly understand them. So I want you to tackle with your ethics. I want to make you a good enough salesperson in it. Is this okay? But I want you to understand that as long as you're painting the full picture and you're speaking a language that they understand, that is not a manipulation. That is not something to struggle with. That is giving them the respect of understanding why they want to make a decision and speaking the language that they understand within that. Okay, so let's pop back over to here, right? So we're gonna have discovery questions until you feel like you have a true grasp of what defines their decision-making process for the sale of this house. If you haven't already gotten your property information into your CRM from a previous phone call, you need to collect the property intake information and all the normal stuff that you're going to be getting, right? Like how long have they owned it? Have the kitchen and bathrooms been updated in the last 3 years? How old is the air conditioner? Like all that boring stuff that you're going to have to get on any lead. You got to get that. Here's a list of questions you definitely need to ask. Always start out with, why are you looking to sell? This is an understanding phase question. If you do decide to sell to us or anybody else, do you want to do it in 30 days, 90 days, sometime further out? This is a question that was inspired through, oh my gosh, what is his name? Why am I blanking on this? He's a great guy, has a great sales process, and I can't even think of his name right now. Gosh darn it, whatever. It'll come to me tonight at like midnight and I'm going to go live and I'm going to be like, oh, it's this guy. But you probably know who I'm talking about. Remind me, did you have a mortgage on this house? Any other kind of liens, taxes, something like that? If yes, you got to collect those. Is there anyone in your corner helping you make this decision to sell the property, right? And then I love this question. This is one of my favorite questions. This is great understanding phase question to know whether or not seller financing is going to be on the table. That question is, do you have any immediate and pressing cash financial needs, like a broken down car or a medical bill that needs to be paid off, something like that, okay? I want you to say that in that order, in those words, in that phrase. That's how we like going about it. Yes, John Martinez, that is the guy I was trying to think of. Thank you for posting that up, hermano. So there are these questions that you definitely need to ask every time. Now, with many of the answers, you should follow up with Socratic questions like, okay, so when you say blank, what do you mean by that? Right? Get a true understanding of where they're at, because every piece of information that they're going to be giving you is valuable to understanding where they are in their life and where they are in this decision process. And then there's some questions that you might ask, right? What do you think has gotten in the way of you getting this taken care of? What scares you about trying to get this house sold? What scares you about not trying to get this house sold, right? There's things that you might ask. You're going to let this stage go on as long as necessary, but you have to have your compass set to close, right? You have to understand that they know and you know that the only reason that y'all's relationship exists is because you want to buy this house and they need to sell it. Let's not gloss over that. Okay? If you come in as the counselor, as the friend, as the let me help you with everything that might be going on in your life, it is going to be disingenuous eventually, and that incongruency in their mind is going to lead them to saying no. But they're going to say no because you told them that you were there to help, and then all of a sudden, you started making business decisions. Right? A straight line. You've got to be a straight line the whole time. You've got to be true to yourself. Know thyself and present thyself as thyself. Right? If you're there to make business decisions, you're there to make business decisions. That's okay. It can be good, and I encourage and I hope and pray that you are there to help them. But let's be real, that's a secondary motivation. If you just wanted to help people, you would be volunteering for the Red Cross. You're not. You're in real estate because there's a lot of zeros on these checks. So don't hide that. Okay? We know that we're there for business, and it may be very close second, but it is a second motivation that you're also able to help people. I love using this phrase of, look, at the end of the day, I'm here because it makes money. This is how I put food on my family's table. However, I love the fact that by helping people like you out of this situation, because it actually kills me to hear that you're having to go through blank, 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 and, I can't help you with blank. When you wake up, you don't have to think about what's happening with this house. That's where I can help in this situation, right? We steer it back. We keep that understanding going. We are building rapport, but this phase, the understanding phase, should not take more than 30 or 45 minutes. If you're going more understanding phase alone, you're either too scared or too lost, I'll say, to know why you're there. You're there to buy that that's needed in that amount of time. Now, once you pass that understanding phase, once you feel like it may be 5 minutes. I've had situations, many of them, in fact. I mean, my average went up over time, but for the longest time, my average inside of a house was 45 minutes to an hour. I would walk in, meeting them for the first time, and walk out with a signed contract within 45 minutes to an hour. Because typically I could get that understanding phase down to about 10 to 20 minutes, and then the affirmation and the alignment phase could take up the rest of that time, and we're ending with a contracting period that took up about 15 minutes, right? So you've got like what's the word I'm looking for? Like a transition from your understanding to your contract that lasts maybe 20 or 30 minutes. You can get it down to that. Now, even in my longest times, I think it was like an hour and a half, right? But once you have that grip of, okay, this is why they're going to sell their house. These are the things they're worried about. This is what they want to get out of it. And this is why. Sometimes you can solve a why with less money than you can solve a what. If you ask them, what are you looking to walk away with? They're going to say $60,000. If you say, why are you trying to sell this house? They might say, well, I've got a $10,000 medical bill I need to be paid off. You can solve the why so much cheaper than the what very often. Once you get those whys, once you understand why they're going to make a decision to sell this house, then you're going to move into the affirmation phase. Now, the affirmation phase is a very important phase. I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to kind of describe what I mean by this. Okay, so you're going to repeat back to them the things that they've told you, which define how they will make the decision to move forward with selling you this house. Okay, repeat back to them. I'm starting the things that they have told you, which define how they will make the decision to move forward with selling you this house. Clarify and simplify their decision-making process by helping call attention to the things that are important to them in the decision-making process that will also play into how they should work with you. Give them affirmation that what they are thinking about, or give them affirmation that they think about things the right way, and give them encouragement for them in understanding your process. Here's what the affirmation phase is, okay? So let's say you're on the long end and you spent 45 minutes on rapport building in the understanding phase. You've spent 45 minutes figuring out why they might decide to move along with you. Do you think that there's 45 minutes of information that determines why they're going to decide? It's going to be the deciding factor? 45 minutes worth of stuff? That's a lot of stuff. Remember what I was talking about in the understanding phase? You're going to pick out, you're going to be cued into these things that matter for that sales process. So now, after you've grasped all of that and you've let them discuss the percent of it does not matter for the sale of this house, but 10 or 20 of it does, now is the time where you call back to the top that 10 or 20% of stuff. Okay? They've just spoken for 45 minutes. They've got a lot of stuff on their mind. They're very nervous. They've got a lot. They don't know how you're meeting, they're meeting you for the first time, blah, blah. There's just so much going on right now. So we're going to clarify and simplify their decision-making process by helping recall the pieces of information that they gave you that you recognized would be important in their decision-making process to selling you the house, right? Whatever those things may be. But if they're talking to an investor to sell their house, there's a reason. Right? We are the easy button. People don't always push the easy button when the more money button is on the table, which would be fixing it up and selling it on the market themselves. So they've got a lot in their mind. We want to pull up these pieces of information that they told us in the understanding phase, and we want to remind them of that, and we want to give them encouragement that everything's going to be okay. Right? Because it is. You're here now. You're going to be able to help them. Even if you're not their guy, you should be able to steer them in the right direction of what is best for them. Let's sell immediately. You've got a lot of money sitting in the bank account to fix this thing up. I mean, why don't you just fix it up and I'll get you with a realtor and you can get the most out of this. That's how you're going to get the most out of this. And if they're just like, look, I just want to be done with it. Okay, cool. Right? Now, I just want to be done with it is one of those pieces of information that you're going to repeat back during the affirmation phase to encourage them, right? Maybe with it, you're going to be like, look, it sounds like I understand. I mean, you just kind of want to be done with this all. And I get that. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on in your life and you're doing really well over there and you don't want to have to mess with this. And that's where I can come into play to help you out with that. So it's good that you called me. You did a great job by deciding that this was the road you want to go down, because if you want to just be done with it, I'm your guy. Right? So what I've done there is I've repeated back the words that they told me. I have given them encouragement that was a good decision. That was a good road to go down. And I'm also encouraging them to know that I'm their guy. I'm going to be somebody that works for them, right? You're giving them affirmation that they think about things the right way, because they're probably, in the market that we're in, they're probably getting told by all kinds of different people how wrong they are with this, how wrong they are with that, how they're behind on payments, and they're just kind of getting beaten down, right? They're not bad people. I've yet to buy a house from a bad person. Just good things or bad things happen to good people. Sometimes they get into a spot and they need to be encouraging to them. Help them understand that you think highly of them, that you're not thinking down on them for having to go to an investor. You are encouraging them because they have made a wise decision for the situation that they're in. Again, it goes back to, I don't care if that sales pitch works for you or for Joey over there. I don't care if you would never sell to an investor. This person has decided for their life that selling to an investor is the best way to go for that, and that's cool. As long as they know what the options are, you can encourage them into saying, hey, good job. You know what your options are. You chose one. You're convicted to it and you're sticking with it. I love that. I love working with people who know what they want to get done. It makes my life so much easier. So I'm glad that we're talking, right? There's another affirmation on that same kind of level. Here's an example. There's a couple of examples here, right? You want to follow your affirmations with compliments, positive statements, like I just talked about, right? It sounds like, I'm using this one, right? Sounds like sticking to your word is something that you take very seriously, which is huge. I love doing business with people like you. It's so hard to find that these days, right? Sounds like you've been really dragged down by these issues with your parents' health. I'm so sorry that you've been having to deal with that, but it's just so great talking to somebody that actually cares for their parents. They're really lucky to have you. Okay? If they told me in my understanding phase that part of their motivation is that they needed to get into a bigger house so that they could move their parents in because their parents' health was going poorly, or their parents live in another state and they're selling their house to move in with them, here you go. Right? If they say anything about sticking to their word, that's always one that I want to pull out, because I think it's very important for people to remember as we get into these next stages. Look, if you tell me that you're going to do something, I'm going to go down this road assuming that you were telling me the truth. So I want to reaffirm and point out to them that this is something that's important to them and it's important to us. It sounds like statements are very important, repeating their pain points to them, using the same words that they use. Like I said, if they call it a commode, I don't care if you've never called it a commode before, call it a commode. As a matter of fact, if you look in my CRM, on my sales notes, I've got a rapport section for all of my conversations. Write down little words that I wouldn't use that this person's using, so that in my follow-up calls, I can be sure to remember to use those words, right? This rapport building part of it is very important for them to know. Look, it doesn't matter if you would never call it a commode. You care enough about them to know that if you could take one thing off of their plate, which is translating the fact that you call it a toilet into a commode, that's one fewer thing that's bugging their mind up. You're freeing their mind to be able to think about the things that really matter, because you are the one who is skilled enough in conversation to understand that you can adapt and make this right. You want to reaffirm qualities that they've shown, which are going to be beneficial to your sales process. Here's the example. Hey, I totally get it. You just want to get things finished and done with, and you've hit roadblock after roadblock, but lucky for you, we're talking right now. And I'm going to be able to buy this house, and at least I can take this one thing off your plate, right? I gave you that example a little bit earlier. That affirmation phase is going to help them to remember in that last 45 minutes worth of stuff, you told me a bunch of things. These are the really help you make the decision to work with me. Because look, I care about these things too. These are the things I care about. These are the things you care about, which moves us into the alignment phase. Okay, the alignment phase is the final phase. Now, if you are a creative executive or accelerator that has access to the intranet, you will also see that between the affirmation phase and alignment phase, there are a few pages of transitional scripting that you can read through. As a quick side note about scripts, I'm not a fan of scripts. I'm not a fan of scripts in the way that most people do scripts, okay? The problem is that most people think about a script as something that you're going to sit in front of your computer and read through and look for a prompt from them to say, and then you click on the button that brings you this and you read it verbatim. Right? Maybe that's how the banks do it. Maybe that's how the telemarketers do it. But who likes getting called by a telemarketer? We're not telemarketers. I think a good script is something like this, that you read, you have a conversation example in your mind that gives you a good idea of what this is going to look like, gives you tools to use, you make that part of your soul, and then you can just kind of spew back the idea of maybe something that's in there, even if it's not word for word, all right? You want to be able to know, okay, this is the style of response I want to give to this thing. So our script is a very long script and it's very conversational. And I want you to read that and make that part of your soul, and it's going to make it easier for you to bring up in a conversation, but I don't want this up in front of you on your screen when you're talking to somebody. Okay, let's hop back in here. The alignment phase. The alignment phase is very important. This is where your offer is going to come in. Use everything that you have learned about your seller to align their goals and decision processes with what you're able to offer. Think of this as learning in the first two stages that Spanish is their first language. This phase is where you switch to speaking Spanish. You need to infuse words and decision processes that make sense to them in this phase, and this is your chance to show them that you truly heard what they've told you and how your company aligns with their goals, right? So we do have some scripts to help you go through and kind of, where do you put your pauses? How do you do your initial offer? How do you, what do you do if they say no because they want a way higher offer, or they say no and you're comfortable with seller financing, or it's still no, they want cash to, right? Like, how do you go through those things? That's, if you're buying remotely, if you're buying locally. But the point is, this right here is where you are aligning with them. Think about it like this. We need for them to understand that we understand. And people want to work with people that remind them of them, that they get along with, right? And so we're not going to come through and say, hey, I know you really care about sticking to your word, but guess what? I don't, right? The alignment phase is where we're going to say, hey, I know you really care about sticking to your word, and I care about that too. And I told you earlier that I would like to come in like a couple grand lower. I told you yesterday that I was going to come in at 72. I really want to be at 70, but I told you 72, so we're going to do that because we align with you. Sticking to your word is very important, right? That is where you are able to kind of align your offer. So think about it like this. You want them and their self-identity to be aligned with selling that house to you. The example that I can think of right now, and I did an episode on this last year. I had a property that my sales team had gone through. Short here, the lady was going to sell us a house. She didn't show up to closing like 3 times in a row. We even sent a car to pick her up because she was unable to drive. So we were sending cars. She wouldn't go, that kind of thing. My sales team couldn't get through it. My partner couldn't get through it. He asked me to call. So I called, and I was able to get her in the car that day, that morning, within an hour, right? The down to is that, and this example is probably what made me think of what we're talking about, sticking to your word, is what made me think of this. Nephew or something like that apparently she had told many years ago that she would give him this house, right? And, so when I call, she's like using those kinds of words. She's like, well, apparently I said this, and essentially I take sticking to my word very seriously, and I told him that I need to say that. I need to do that. And so I was able to align with that and being like, look, I agree. It's very important to stick to your word. I absolutely agree with that. But if you have to look at, you've given your word to 2 different people, right? Like you gave your word to him, but you also gave your word to us. And when you gave your word to us, you gave your word to us in the form of a signed contract. That's a pretty strong giving the word. So much so that I've spent money marketing. I've spent my staff's time putting this all together. I buy this house who's expecting to have this house sold to them today, right? So you've given your word to somebody in a way that you don't even really remember doing. And you've given your word to us in the form of a signed contract and multiple conversations over several weeks. And I take that very seriously because I gave my word to my buyer saying that they could buy this house. We were going to be going to closing. Today, you're going to close on yours, and then tomorrow I was selling it to him. So by you backing out on your word with me, you're making me back out on my word with my buyer and turn down jobs to come in here with this, right? Like there is a domino effect that's happening here, and we're both in the same way. Like, I agree, that's very important. And if we were just talking for the first time and you brought that up, I would drop it. But here we are. And you see what happened there is I'm aligning what was important to her and her self-identity with the process of selling that house to us. And to be the type of person who sticks to her word, then you're going to sell this house to us because you gave us your word. You see how that works? We understood that was very important to her. I reaffirmed that was very important to her. As a matter of fact, if you go through and look at that episode, I can't remember what we called it, but it would be, maybe a live call review or something from last year. I have the recording of that call. Go through the understanding phase. You'll hear me repeat back to her the stuff about her being very important to her, that she's going to stick to her word, because I wanted to see how she reacts to that, right? I'm going to affirm these statements. And she took very strongly to that. I'm like, okay, there's my angle, right? So then in the alignment phase, I'm like, okay, well, if that is how you view yourself, you can't view yourself that way and also not sell me this house, because now you're being incongruent with your own self-identity, right? So we are aligning our process with what they know themselves to be, or how they know that they are making those decisions. And we're bringing those decisions and we are bringing those pieces of information back to the top of their mind right before we're hitting this alignment stage, through the affirmation stage, through, hey, this was important to you, right? And this was important to you, right? And they're gonna be like, yeah, man, that's absolutely important to me. Boom, alignment. Okay, well, if that's important to you, it's important to me. And it doesn't look like that's important to you if you don't sell that house to me, right? Again, not doing anything but pulling out factual information about where they are at and helping them to simplify this decision process by reminding them what they themselves is important to their decision-making process. We are helping them swim through all the mud that they have and pointing out, yeah, man, you got 45 minutes worth of stuff that you felt like you needed to tell me. But really, at the end of the day, these are the things that I hear that matter to you. Is that right? Affirmed. Okay, well, if that's right, let's tell you how, right? You told me in my understanding phase that, you didn't need cash, that you were going to sell this off as a rental. Is that right? That's right. Well, I've done rentals too. I totally get that. Rentals actually suck. And let me tell you why. But the cool thing about that is what that means is that you don't need all that cash today, right? You're good to take your equity in installments. So I can buy this house from you today and still give you were actually looking for, that you thought that the rentals were going to give you. But I can give that to you through seller financing mechanisms. And this is how it's going to work, right? If what's important to you is getting monthly income, that you're not going to pay all the taxes on a purchase price of a property this year, that you're going to get long-term income coming in, that's important to you, right? That's important to me too. That's why I do things the way that I do things, is because I sell with seller financing. Fortunate for you, you're in a good financial spot where you can accept an offer like this to take your equity in installments. So let me tell you how I do things to make my money, because you can make the money the same way to me with seller financing. You see what I'm doing? So you've got to kind of go through that in your mind. How can you understand where they're at, affirm with them? Sometimes affirmation is a question, right? You're throwing something out there like, I think what you're telling me is this. Is that true? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Boom. Now you've affirmed an understanding that you are able to kind of put into a picture that aligns with your process to get this thing bought or sold or whatever that might be. And this 3-stage process is how sales work. It doesn't matter if you're buying a car or you're buying whatever, right? Asking somebody out on a date. This is how you get from new conversation to yes at the end of the day. I would encourage you to think about your most successful sales situations and see if you can fit that sales situation into these 3 phases. See if you can understand, be like, dude, I killed it on that sale. I did really well. Go back through it in your mind. Do you feel like you had an understanding phase where you then affirmed everything that was going to, align with your needs? I bet you did, right? This is how things work. So again, view this through the head, heart, gut lens. I think it'll be very beneficial for you to do that. And I'd love to hear your success stories with that, right? Like I said, I was talking with a student yesterday. We kind of went through this. We were doing some coaching. She had a massive success on the call last night. One of her first massive successes that she had. And we're going to talk again this afternoon to help her get that thing contracted up. And I love hearing stories like that. So I want to hear stories like that from you too, right? I would love that. Before I let you go, I do want to mention, we do have the mastermind next week. Next week is going to be killer. We have Mike Powell coming in, who is Mitch Stevens' essentially integrator. He's been in charge of the marketing and sales and processes and for the last decade with Mitch and just done a stinking killer job. And he's going to come in and talk all day next Thursday about those things and be a full open book about how he and Mitch Stevens have bought all of these assets over this last decade. They've done like 1,500 deals together in that decade. And he's going to be an open book about that. And I'm really looking forward to that. So if you are interested, people who care about doing creative financing ethically, who are looking to build their legacy well through creative financing, but are also going to be doing wholesaling and renting and flipping and that kind of stuff on the way, I really encourage you to check us out, CreativeCashFlow.com/memberships. If you click that join, you'll fill out a little questionnaire that'll help me to come into it. And then you and I will speak on a Zoom call and we'll see if it's a good fit. But if that's you, I encourage you to get in there today because we've got to go Friday. We have to give our final RSVP numbers, set a couple of seats open that we can put you in. And I would love to have you there. If you've been considering moving up and getting into a community of people, one of the things that I find is very common, a common string in our members is that none of them are full of themselves. None of them are like, oh, well, I'm the most successful thing ever. But at the end of the day, and you may fall into this category, you're probably the most successful person in your friend group. And it's not like you look down on anybody else. It's just kind of factually like you've always done better and you're always kind of on that next level and you love everybody you're around, but you just kind of know our group is full of those people, right? A bunch of those people who can help you get to that next level. That's what the Creative Executives Mastermind is. And I'd really encourage you to go there and check it out. CreativeCashFlow.com/memberships. Again, I'm Grant Kemp. CreativeCashFlow.com. I love helping you guys through this stuff. I hope that you got a lot from this. Please comment below on if there was a particular aha moment that you had in today's video. Those things. Is there something that really stuck out to you that was like ooh, That's good. I'm going to put that in. We're about to stop going live, so if you're watching live, on YouTube, it's going to switch from the live chat box to the comments on the actual YouTube video. Again, I would really be encouraged to know if there was something that gave you an aha moment on that. Thank you guys for being here. I look forward to talking to you soon. I'll see you next week.